everybody, welcome back to Cottoverdi. My name's Annette and today I thought I would take you through 4 different plants that I'm sowing and show you, talk about what they're like and then show you how I'm sowing those seeds. And then after that I thought I'd show everybody how my seedlings are doing so far this year for everything that I've sown, and just talk you through the germination rates that I've had and what's germinated and what hasn't, and how I'm treating all these seedlings and looking after them. So let's get started. I'll put the names and a picture up on the screen so you can see which plants I'm talking about. So for those of you who don't know, I live in South Buckinghamshire in the UK, which is equivalent to a zone 8A in the States. We really don't get temperatures much below -10 degrees centigrade, and so that's sort of what I'm working with when I talk about whether things are hardy or tender in my area. The first seed I'm sowing is called Acerina scandens, or climbing snapdragon. It's also called chickabiddy, which I think is a cute name, but climbing snapdragon describes it much better because it's this vining plant that grows to 4 meters or 12 foot. Tall, and it has these dangly sort of snapdragon-y bell-shaped flowers. Mine are going to be white, but it comes in pink or purple as well. My seed packet says it's a half-hardy greenhouse annual stroke perennial, and the reason is because it's not going to survive anything below 5 to 7 degrees centigrade. So once it gets to that temperature, it's just going to die off. So the only way to treat it as a perennial is if you could bring it somewhere warm, like a greenhouse or I guess a conservatory. They would normally be warm enough as well. I really do want to try this plant because apparently it's really floriferous, it's incredibly showy, and it's going to flower between June and October. So just as the roses are coming into bloom, I'm imagining that I'm going to have some of these white flowers as well. And I think they're quite big. They're not tiny little ones like you'd find on a jasmine maybe. I think they're going to be bigger than that. So when I sow this seed, it says to just cover it with a sprinkling of soil. I'll probably use vermiculite because it says light is needed for germination. Ideal temperature is 18 to 20 degrees centigrade. So I'll put it on a heat mat, and it says it's going to take between 2 and 3 weeks to germinate. And the reason that I'm growing Acerina as opposed to Cobaea scandens is because I think Cobaea you have to start super early and it might not flower for a really long time, whereas I think that the climbing snapdragon is going to flower sooner and for longer. So I'm kind of switching it up, and I've decided not to grow Cobaea scandens or cup and saucer vine this year. I'm going to grow the climbing snapdragon instead and see whether I prefer that. It does say we can sow between February and April, so there's still plenty of time if you fancy growing some of this to grab yourself some seeds. So the next plant I'm sowing is called Heliotrope marine. So I'm growing a violet blue version. This is a cherry pie plant, and it's called a cherry pie plant apparently because it has a fragrance of vanilla and cherry pie, and I'm really looking forward to having that. Every year I grow a nemesia called Wisley, and it smells incredible of vanilla, and you just get these wafts of vanilla, and I really enjoy that. So I'm very much looking forward to having this cherry pie plant with a similar fragrance. Heliotropes grow mounds of wrinkly green leaves, and then they've got this sort of massive head of flowers that's about 6 inches across apparently. Mine's going to be a violet blue, it's called marine, and these are perfect for bedding plants or in pots or containers, and they grow to about 1.5 foot, so maybe 45 centimeters tall. So they're half hardy annuals. They're not going to make it through a winter frost, which is fine by me. I'm just going to treat them as an annual. Perfect time to start sowing them now, February. So they're super easy to sow. You just sprinkle them on some compost, cover them with a sprinkling of compost or vermiculite, and they'll germinate between 15 and 20 degrees. And I'll keep you updated on how they do. I think I'm possibly going to sow the whole packet. I don't know how, I don't know that there are very many in here. I might try sowing the whole packet so I've got loads. The next seed I'm sowing is called Schizanthus Wisa, and I'm sowing an angel wings mix. And this is also called a poor man's orchid. And that is because the flowers are stunning. They really do look a little bit like an orchid. They've kind of got this sort of yellowy tongue, and they come in loads of different varieties of colours. I've only been able to find a mix, so I can't find like a single colour, and I really don't love having mixes, but hopefully these colours will blend really nicely. They come in like pinks and whites and purples, and they really are stunning, and I'm hoping to be able to use them as cut flowers. Apparently they stand up quite well in a vase, so that's good, although it does look like they need staking. Having said that, I don't think they grow that tall, so in my research I found that most places say they only grow to about 1.5 foot or 45 centimetres, but then I've also seen pictures where people have staked them, so maybe we need to stake them to get the really straight stems. I don't know, I'll keep you updated on that. Interestingly, to sow these, apparently we sow them on the surface of the soil, don't cover them at all, but they need darkness to germinate, so I will probably put an upturned tray on top until they've germinated. So normally with things that need darkness to germinate, you would sprinkle something on top, but it says not to sprinkle anything on top in order to germinate them. So these are going to need between 15 and 22 degrees, and they probably germinate in about 3 weeks. So I'll put them on my heat mats and wait until they germinate, and then obviously take the lid off them so that they get some light. I've read some conflicting information about the poor man's orchid. Some places say that they need to be planted in full sun, but I've also read that they don't tolerate heat well. So I think if we can plant them somewhere where they're going to get a little bit of shade, I think that will probably help. So these are half-hardy annuals. They're going to flower between July and September, but they will definitely get killed by a frost, and I'll just sow them again next year if I enjoy them. The next plant I'm sowing is called Francoa. I've got 3 different varieties, and it's a hardy perennial. I used to have Francoa in my garden and I loved it, but I believe, having done some research, that I killed it because it does not like sitting in waterlogged soil in the winter. And I think that the bed it was in never really dried out. So although it wasn't waterlogged, it wasn't a marsh or anything, I think it just doesn't get enough sun in the winter, and so it was always soggy. So Francoa is also called bridal wreath or wedding flower, and the reason for this is because it creates these gorgeous spires of flowers in pinks and purples. But the interesting thing about the spires of flowers is that each spire has got loads of flowers up the stem with like 4 petals on it, but all the flowers come out at once, and they're really long lasting in a vase. So I'm guessing that's maybe why it gets used for weddings a lot. And I have to say, when it was in my garden, I loved it. It kind of stopped me in my tracks, and it's really sad that I don't have it anymore. So rather than buying new plants, I'm going to try sowing them. So it likes full sun to part shade, and it flowers between July and August. So it's not an extremely long flowering period, but actually the foliage looks pretty anyway, and as I said, the flowers are really stunning and it's totally worth having. So the first one I'm sowing is called Pink Giant, and it grows to 90 centimetres tall, so taller than the other varieties that I'm growing, and it's got larger flowers on it. So it's got larger flowers than the other varieties. I guess that's why it's called Pink Giant. So it's kind of a medium pink with the darker pink stripe in it. So the next one I'm growing is called Molly Anderson, and it will grow to 70 centimetres tall, and it's a paler version of Pink Giant but with darker markings in the centre. The last one I'm growing is called Rogerson's Form, and this one grows to 45 centimetres, but it's a really deep lilac pink. So those are all the seeds that I'm sowing today, and I'm just going to get on and sow them, and then I'll put them on my seed starting racks and talk you through everything that's germinated so far. So these are my seed starting racks. It's a bit echoey in here because this is an empty room, but this side is not on heat mats and this side is on heat mats. So these have all germinated, and I'll just go through with you the things that have germinated and what they're looking like. Let me show you. So these are my Schizanthus. Now I do keep them on the dry side because they prefer that. So these here are Voyage to First Love. This is Roseanne to Clear Green, and you can see the tiny little seeds there. And then this is Corelli Light Pink, and I literally only have two. So I've got one here and then one here, but it's just not growing. So I'm not convinced that that one is going to do well. I think I only got one. And then on the other Schizanthus I sowed, nothing's germinated at all. And I just think it's because it was old seed. They are not on a heat mat, but they're under grow lights, and they're just super tiny, super small, and I'm going to wait until they're a little bit bigger before I thin them, but I will definitely be thinning them. I don't like to have that many. I oversowed because I knew the seeds were old and I wasn't convinced how many I was going to get. And you can see that with the Roseanne 2 Clear Green, even though I oversowed, there are a lot less in this particular one than in the Voyage to First Love. So germination definitely decreases with the age of the seed. So this is the next tray of things that I sowed later in January. So I sowed penstemon on the 23rd of January, and I sowed steeper on the 10th of January. I sowed penstemon on the 23rd of January, and I sowed the fleabane Erigeron Karwinskianus on the 30th of January. So with the penstemons, I sowed absolutely loads, and these are the only ones that have germinated so far. So the first ones to germinate were the twizzle coral, and they germinated in 4 days, and I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6 out of 8 germinated of the twizzle coral. And then this one here is the chocolate drop, and they germinated after, I had 1 after 8 days and 2 by 9 days. And now I've got, I think, a couple in each cell. So there are a couple in here, maybe 3 in here. It's quite hard to see. Maybe if I hold them like this, you can see better. So yeah, those are doing really well, but the other penstemon have not germinated. With the steeper germinated super fast. After 7 days, I sowed 1 in each cell, and I've only got 4, so 4 out of 8. I don't think the others are going to germinate. They're quite long and not particularly strong, but maybe that's just how grass grows. We'll see. And then this is the Erigeron Karwinskianus. So this is the Mexican fleabane, and I'm very guilty of oversowing. I just sprinkled it because it was too tiny for me to do anything else. And so I'm going to have to thin those as well. It germinated in 4 days. And then over on this side, I've got all the things that are on heat mats. So there won't be anything germinated under here because I did a massive sowing yesterday. But this tray here, I did sow slightly less recently. And I believe I had some germination in here. So these are also some penstemons that haven't germinated yet. That tray at the back there are penstemons that haven't germinated yet. But here, with the eryngiums, this is the white glitter. I sowed them on the 10th of January, left them in the fridge for 3 weeks, and then took them out of the fridge and put them on a heat mat. And they've all germinated. Well, not all, but I've had loads of germination. They germinated quite quickly in 7 days. And I'm just waiting for a few more to pop through before I take them off the heat mat. So I'll probably wait another day and then take them off the heat mat and take the lid off them, and I'll just put them on the other side over there with all the other things that aren't on heat mats. So yesterday I did a massive sewing, which I didn't film because I wasn't sure many people would be that interested in what I was sewing. They were all quite random, but I'll tell you what I sewed. So yesterday I sewed Philotus joey, it's also called Mulla Mulla. I sewed Vicaria hispanica, which is a cowcockle. I sewed all my larkspurs. I sewed 9 different varieties of larkspur yesterday. Yes, they should be sown in the autumn, but I didn't get around to it. We had holidays and stuff, so you can sow them now. I think this is probably the very last moment to sow larkspur, and I've sown them at this time in the year before and last year I had really good plants, so I'm not too worried about that. I sowed my Orlea, again something else that should be autumn sown, but you can also sow it now. I sowed something called Sylphia Mori, or Moore's Rose and Reed, very excited about that. I also sowed some Adenophora stricta, or ladybells, and some Aruncus, which is also called goat's beard, and I sowed something called Cherophyllum hirsutum, which is a hairy chervil, or a pink Queen Anne's lace. I sowed my Nautia macedonica, which I sow every year, that's the Macedonian scabious. I sowed some Persicaria, Prince's Feather. The variety that I sowed has got really nice drooping flowers. And I sowed some Pimpinella, which is Burnet saxifrage. So I had a massive sewing day yesterday, having a little bit of a sewing day today. I really do get going in February and March. It's my busiest sewing time. I've also got all of my ranunculus sitting in their cells in crates in a cold dark room, but I will bring them out and put them on the bottom of these racks as soon as I start seeing shoots. I really hope you've had some fun today joining me whilst I sowed some seeds and I showed you what's going on. I will turn these lights back on, don't panic, but they flicker on the film for some reason, so I can't have them on whilst I'm filming, but they're going to go back on. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you all next time.